So I've talked at length in the past about my two favorite FPS games of all time. That's Quake 1 and Doom 64. They're both classic action, puzzle-packed boomer shooters with really unique and inspired art direction, both of which have aged beautifully and honestly, to me, play better, particularly Quake, than really any modern FPSs I know of. After those two, Dusk and Blood are definitely duking it out for the number 3 spot in my mind. I guess those 4 would be my FPS Mount Rushmore, so Quake 1 is my Lincoln, my tried and true, old reliable. Doom 64 is probably Washington, the foundation, the beginning of everything. Dusk is definitely my Teddy Roosevelt, my wild card, young, fresh, different. I guess that makes Blood Jefferson? I don't know. Dusk versus Blood. I mean, I adore both games, and I think Dusk remains the cream of the crop as far as modern boomer shooter style FPS games go. There's lots of cool ones. Zorch, Ion Fury, Medieval, but yeah, Dusk is just in a league of its own in my opinion. And so much has already been said about it, rightfully so too. Its creator, David Szymanski, is probably my favorite indie dev in the business today. His games are wild, they're weird, so much fun. Think David Lynch meets John Romero meets a super friendly, classically trained violinist from rural Pennsylvania. That's David. So go buy and play his games. They're super affordable too. Basically any potato PC can run them. Chop Goblins, which is also on Switch now, is maybe literally the best $4 I've ever spent in my life. It's so addictive. It's endlessly replayable. It's funny. It's ridiculous. Yeah, David's work rules, and I think lots of people have caught on to that fact, and it's part of why Dusk has been such a success and has found so many players. And really, Dusk is a great gateway drug into the rest of David's games. It's the natural starting point. But this is why I want to talk about Blood, because a lot of what I just said, nerdy, true old school FPS fans like myself already know this. I'm preaching to the choir here, and don't get me wrong, Blood's praises have been sung, especially in recent years too, as it's been discovered and rediscovered by many FPS fans. But compared to Dusk, and especially Quake and Doom, it's still operating to a degree on cult status, I would say. It's like the dark horse of the 90s FPS games. Dusk has like 4 times as many Steam reviews, and has Switch and PlayStation ports, and has the benefit of publisher-producer Dave Oshry screaming its praises, justifiably on social media for the last half-decade. So when it comes to Blood, I mean, thank God, Night Dive Studios, the masters of remastering retro shooters, gave it a facelift and a PC re-release a couple years back, because otherwise you might not even know it's Monolith Productions' first ever game. And yes, that's the same Monolith of Middle-earth, Condemned, and Fear fame. Now, I believe Blood has sold several million copies since first releasing in 1997, but to date it's always been a PC exclusive, so most console gamers have never touched it. And for that reason, among a couple others, like its high difficulty level, particularly dark and violent subject matter, it just never had the widespread mainstream appeal of Doom or Quake, but to me is no less worthy of boomer shooter Rushmore. I wouldn't call Blood underrated, maybe just underappreciated. It's not even as easily searchable, because its name is so much more, I guess, generic or less SEO friendly. But let's get into the reasons why I feel this game is so special, so worth its place on that 90s FPS Rushmore, and why you should either replay it or experience it for the first time. So Blood has often been called the darling of the 90s build engine games, and I do feel that title is really well deserved. Build, if you're not familiar, is a 2.5D engine, let's call it, that was really a response to id Tech, id Software's original Doom engine, designed by John Carmack, and in some ways Build was more impressive too. Programmer Ken Silverman created the engine in 1995, and it went on to run some of the best boomer shooters ever, like Duke Nukem 3D, Power Slave, Shadow Warrior. These games, including Blood, all use the engine a little differently and do have unique worlds and art styles and game feels, but there is this special connective tissue with any build engine game, and it's why so many people got so excited when a game like Ion Fury came along a couple years back, a game that was designed to be a truly authentic love letter to build engine shooters. But speaking for myself, I still remember my first impressions of Build back in the day with Duke 3D. There's just nothing like a build game. You can spot one from 1,000 miles away. The sectors, the polygons, the parallax skies. If you're asking yourself what makes a build engine game different than, let's say, classic Doom, in my opinion, in build games, player movement is super fast. Sometimes freakishly so. Jumping and crouching are particularly bouncy too, and there's a big focus on interactivity with the environment. My mind immediately goes to being able to flush toilets in Duke 3D. Little touches that seem non-essential, but are actually extremely essential to the experience of playing a build game. Little touches that distinguish a game like Duke and give it its personality. And there's a greater sense of verticality and environmental layers in many cases too in a build game. I mean, both id Tech and build are essentially pretending to render 3D experiences with 2D trickery. And I'm not saying one engine is necessarily better than the other, they're just different, but build definitely has some tricks up its sleeve that id Tech 1 just didn't, especially when it comes to rendering those immersive layered interior spaces. So imagine all those ingredients inside this 1920s gothic Wild West flavored package. I'll say this, Blood delivers on its name. If you're going to make a shooter and you're going to give it a name that bold and to the point, you can't miss, right? You got to deliver, and Monolith truly did. In short, in Blood, you're this duster-wearing, gunslinging cult member named Caleb, brilliantly brought to life by voice actor Stephen Wyatt. But the cult's god betrays Caleb, killing him and stealing away his lover. But Caleb rises from his tomb, armed with only a pitchfork, and sets off for revenge. It's awesome. From the opening seconds of the first level, cradle to the grave, you understand exactly what this game is. The environments are beautifully rendered, not just by 1997 standards either. Even today, they just ooze personality. One glimpse at the first vista outside of Caleb's tomb, and you realize, intentionally or unintentionally, how many games since have drawn influence from Blood. Those distant foggy mountains, dirt and grime, ornate stone structures, body horror, torture, sacrifice, graveyards full of secrets. Yeah, it's quite the vibe. It makes me think of games like Resident Evil 4, Resident Evil 8, I think of Bloodborne. But Caleb isn't some knight in shining armor. He's not Doom Guy. He's a sadistic fiend who laughs as he incinerates cultists with dynamite. You can get into a pretty depraved headspace with this game because you're evil. The enemies are evil, the world's evil, hence Blood. Caleb has no empathy for his enemies. He doesn't hesitate to kill and cackle. I feel like he's the perfect FPS protagonist and a huge reason why Blood is such a special game. If the protagonist was driven by some weird moral code to eradicate this cult, like a hero or a traditional good guy, or if he was silent and emotionless like the Doom Marine, the game just wouldn't work as well as it does. And while lots of talented folks contributed to Blood, my understanding is that primarily the game is the brainchild of Nick Newhard, who served as the game's designer, lead programmer, de facto director. He was an Apogee Monolith employee in the 1990s, and while Nick and his team were certainly able to learn from the games that came before them, like Doom 1 and 2, like Duke 3D, they smartly iterated on that classic FPS formula. Not only is Blood's art direction even more realized and bespoke and inspired compared to Doom and Duke, but they nailed lots of little details that still set Blood apart, that still make it so worthwhile to rediscover or play for the very first time. Nick has said publicly that Blood was originally conceived as a more serious horror game that paid homage to H.P. Lovecraft, and it was really the style and passion of the game's primary artist, Kevin Kilstrom, that drove the game in a campier and I think more interesting direction, a direction that jibes better with Caleb's character. First, let's talk about the arsenal. Sure, on paper there's a shotgun and a machine gun and some explosives, but in Blood it's all about context, how the weapons look, how they feel, the use cases, how enemies respond to them. If you want to make a unique FPS game, give us unique weapons. So in Blood, every weapon feels like it was designed to not just kill, but what would be the appropriate phrasing for it? Let's say delightfully annihilate. There's this level of theater in Blood's combat gameplay that's missing from so many shooters then and now. Like, sure, there's your standard sawed-off shotgun, except it's not standard. It's like the loudest, chunkiest, most viscerally satisfying boomstick you'll ever use. I mean, I always use the Doom 2 Super Shotgun as my measuring stick for shotguns in any game, but Bloods is right up there with it. Then there's the Napalm Launcher, which turns whole rooms into barbecue pits. It looks and feels so destructive. It feels dangerous to use. You're a little hesitant before firing. Kind of functions more like a splashy grenade launcher. It sends enemies flying, jibs flying, the screams as they burn in front of you. That's the cherry on top. The Tesla cannon arcs these blue bolts, revealing your enemy skeletons almost with an X-ray-like effect. Again, it's fun, it's silly, it's theatrical. Ammo can be pretty sparse for the cannon, but it's super powerful, super fun to use. Definitely one of those special combat chest weapons you want to savor for the right room and the right bunch of baddies. One of my favorites, there's a voodoo doll that you stab with a needle. If an enemy is in front of you, it's a perfect hit scanner. It ignores armor. It can even go through walls. But if an enemy isn't in front of you, it hurts you. It saps Caleb's HP. It's such a clever weapon. There's the spray can. It's a literal aerosol can and lighter, basically a mini flamethrower. This isn't just firepower, right? It's personality. This is Blood at its core. You can imagine Caleb spotting a can of hairspray or something, picking it up, pulling out his lighter, and bam, he's OP. In Blood, there's not grenades, there's dynamite. In different types of dynamite. Dynamite throwing in Blood is practically a sport. You don't just lob it and pray, you finesse it. You learn to hold the charge, time the fuse, bank it off walls, arc it through windows, drop it at your feet and run like hell. It's a mini mind game in every encounter. How many baddies can I tag with this toss? Can I throw this just early enough to catch those cultists as they round the corner? Most games with explosives, they give you little room for finesse. You press the button and boom. But Blood wants you to master geometry, master tempo, pressure, nail the timing, and it's just beautiful. Bodies, ragdolling mid-scream, entire rooms cleared before you even enter them. This isn't Doom. This isn't brute force. It's style. A well-thrown stick of TNT and Blood is one of the most satisfying kills in any FPS game I know of. There's the Tommy gun, flare gun, pitchfork for melee, just a lot of fun weapons that all have unique use cases, because it's not enough to just give the player a lot of random weapons, but to give players weapons with purpose, and that's what really separates Blood's arsenal from other shooters of the era. Doom's weapons are iconic, sure, but Blood's are mischievous. They want you to get weird. Dynamite isn't just a throwable, it's an art. Time it right, bounce it off a wall, mid-air detonation, chef's kiss. There's almost a fighting game level of mastery if you choose to go down that rabbit hole. Enemies. Let's talk about who you're blasting. These cultists aren't just cannon fodder. They scream Latin phrases at you and duck for cover. They'll bunny hop out of the way of your fireballs like they've got real reflexes. Then you've got grotesque zombies, freaky gargoyles, axe-hurling butchers, floating psychic horrors. It's a rogues gallery of nightmare fuel, and they're placed strategically. Blood doesn't just throw hundreds of enemies at you like Doom. It's more like a dark little chess match. Peek a corner wrong, get shredded by a hit scanner. Waste your napalm shot, enjoy getting killed by 3 cloaked jerks who were waiting behind the organ in the chapel. It's brutal, it's punishing, it makes every encounter feel earned. There's lots of boss battles. I don't love boss battles in FPS games, but I do think Bloods are more interesting than Doom and Quakes. A common complaint with Blood is that it's too hard. The enemies are too accurate, too hit scanny, but I don't know. The cultists aren't just floating meat sacks. They're armed and dangerous. They're human. They're trying to kill you. Certain rooms are so sweaty, make you so nervous. I think the enemy behavior and difficulty level is nearly perfect for this type of game and what the team was trying to do with it. But yeah, it's hard, especially if you're coming from Doom where you can tank hits and circle strafe your way out of most fights. Blood will punish you for doing this kind of stuff. Hit scanners are everywhere. Miss a step, you're toast. Even walking away from the game for a few days, it's like your timing resets. You come back in and you get wrecked. But, and it's a big but, once you click with Blood, once you realize you're not supposed to play it like Doom, it opens up. I would almost liken it to the transition from Dark Souls to Sekiro. This muscle memory starts kicking in, but it'll mislead you. You have to learn from scratch. You have to be patient. Because mentally, once the game opens up for you, you start pre-firing corners, you bait enemies, you time those perfect dynamite lobs, you channel your inner sharpshooter. It's all about spacing, pacing, and knowing when to go loud versus go stealthy. in Blood. The game has its own rhythm, and once you're in that headspace, it's glorious. It's one of the best feelings in FPS world. And you just have to remember, you're not this superhuman Doom guy. You're Caleb, the vengeful cultist, slinking around corners, lobbing grenades, poking a voodoo doll. The more you get into that depraved mindset, honestly, the better you play. And just another shout out to Kevin Kilstrom, who is the game's primary artist. These enemy sprites are just so good, so unique, very, very different from Doom and Quake, but also the other build games of the day like Duke 3D. Blood enemies are just unmistakable. The way they look, the way they move, the way they sound. Music. Let's not forget the soundtrack, composed by Guy Whitmore and Daniel Bernstein. It's this moody, industrial horror western stew that pairs perfectly with the game's aesthetic. It's ambient, it's subtle, sometimes it's barely there, just enough to make you feel unsettled. You'll be roaming a crypt with faint whispers and church bells echoing, and then suddenly it swells into this nightmare waltz as all hell breaks loose. It's kind of catchy, it's kind of silly. The music is just so inseparable from the gameplay. When I see Blood gameplay, I start hearing that music, and vice versa. If I hear the music, I see the sprites and the level geometry in my mind's eye, and I think that's when you know a studio got it right. I want to shout out some standout levels too. If you follow my channel, you know I really appreciate and geek out about level design, and Blood serves up some real treats in this department. Blood's best levels tell stories without dialogue, just space and design. The game is a lesson and how maps can speak and become more than just a random assortment of geometry. But I'll mostly focus on the first 2 episodes of the game so as to not give too much away later on if you haven't played it yet. First up, it's got to be Phantom Express, E1M3, the game's famous train level. The train isn't just a cool gimmick, it's a masterclass in tight, chaotic design. The whole map is a moving train, claustrophobic, relentless, brilliantly paced. Enemies burst from bunks, chuck dynamite from boxcars, and you're weaving through kitchens and passenger cars under pressure. It's fast, it's mean, and Caleb's objective, it's to blow up the boiler and derail the train. Of course it is. And then there's the twisted gem of Dark Carnival, E1M4. This level is a carnival from hell. Rides, shooting galleries, a freak show, balloons, calliope music. Nothing like this exists in Duke or Quake or Doom. This is so uniquely Blood. Key to what makes this game stand apart, and to this day, even though I've played the level many, many times, I still love exploring it, finding secrets, going into all the nooks and crannies. It's so much fun. There's Cradle to the Grave. Already touched on this one, E1M1, the very first level, and Blood absolutely knows how to make that great first impression. You crawl out of your own grave, blast your way through a graveyard, into a funeral home full of cultists. The progression feels cinematic, with lighting and layout guiding the pace. It's morbid, it's poetic, it's truly a great opening FPS level. Or what about Shipwrecked? E2M1, the first level of the second episode in Blood. Caleb is traveling to the far north as he continues to seek vengeance against the cult that did him wrong. You start on a rowboat floating toward a large ship stuck into an iceberg. You go above deck, below deck, through the maze of ice surrounding the ship. Again, this is unlike anything else from FPS games of this era. And I mean, there's so many more. The lumber mill, the hotel, and all these levels have secret doors, hidden items, ridiculous little Easter eggs. The game rewards curiosity and mastery. Speedrunners thrive too because every map has meaningful shortcuts. As always, I could go on, but to put a pin in it, does Blood owe some of its existence to Doom and Duke 3D? Of course it does. Just like Dark Souls owes Zelda, just like Crash Bandicoot owes Mario, but Blood does not feel derivative. It feels dialed in. You might look back at FPS games from that era and go, oh, this was probably just a less successful Doom imitator, and that really couldn't be further from the truth. Some people, even in 1997, were quick to criticize Blood, as well as a game like Doom 64 for being more visually dated than something like Rare's GoldenEye, which came out in that same year. And I've always felt like this was a prisoner of the moment style take. Were the true 3D models and environments in something like GoldenEye really impressive for the time? Of course. And I grew up playing GoldenEye and its spiritual successor Perfect Dark, and still have a very soft spot in my heart for both of those games, but I feel it's not even close. A game like Blood has, in terms of gameplay and visuals, aged so much better. In 2025, it's faster, smoother, more fun, a far better representation of what I want from an FPS game. It's angry, it's violent, it's cheeky, it's brilliant. And in a world where so many games, then and now, feel like committee-designed corporate slop, Blood feels like the result of a team that really cared. A team that said, what if we made something cool? What if we made something different? And they did. So why didn't Blood blow up in the same way that Doom and Quake did? Well, it came after those games. It had that misfortune. And by the late 90s, lots of people saw GoldenEye and went, hey, I want that. I want that true 3D experience. And this sprite stuff, it's dated to me. Again, like I said, I think that perspective is kind of misguided. I disagree. I think the 2D sprites have aged much better than GoldenEye's chunky 3D models, but we already touched on how the game never made its way to consoles, and oddly still hasn't. I have no idea why the Night Dive re-release is still exclusive to PC, and it just never expanded into a successful long-running franchise like Doom and Quake did. There was a sequel, 1998's Blood 2: The Chosen, but I know I've talked about how Quake 2 doesn't click with me in the way Quake 1 does, but Quake 2 is still a great FPS game. In my opinion, Blood 2 is not. Nick Newhard wasn't involved, only a handful of the team members from the first game returned. Kevin Kilstrom, the composers, but Monolith, feeling that GoldenEye pressure, went full 3D. They also jumped from the 1920s to a futuristic cyberpunky setting. Blood 2 is also different in that you choose one of 4 preset characters to play as. GT Interactive, the game's publisher, also pushed the team to work in a fast and sloppy manner that they weren't comfortable with, and the end result is pretty buggy. It's lacking the polish and the personality of its predecessor. I just don't enjoy it. I would never choose to play it over the original. It feels off to me. And by this time, 1998, 1999, a lot of FPS players had kind of moved on. Half-Life existed. This is that Daikatana era of FPS games where there's lots of awkwardness and growing pains. Not surprisingly, Blood 2 didn't sell well. The IP entered no man's land, eventually landing with Atari, not Monolith. Monolith doesn't even exist anymore. And Blood 3 has been a dream for people like myself for years and years, and you want to believe there's a passionate team out there who could pull it off, but I've mostly given up hope. It's a shame that Blood is a franchise that never was, really, but at least the original game has been preserved by Night Dive. It's easily available on Steam. But let me know what you think of Blood down in the comments. Have you played the game? How does it stack up for you against stuff like Doom? If you enjoyed this discussion, likes and subs here on the channel, they do help. And I also have links to my Discord server, fun place to hang out, talk games, and my Patreon page. Those are down in the video description. A Patreon membership does help me put together more of this kind of content in the future. It also gets you access to exclusive content like my Patreon podcast and monthly newsletter. I look forward to hearing your Blood memories and musings down in the comments. And thanks again. I'll catch you next time.